Well, as we get started here, I would like to tell you that this last presentation is by Jennifer Christensen, who is the founder of ABC English, and she's going to tell us all about how we can help work with those beginning and low level, beginning level ELL learners, and her product, ABC English. So Jennifer, you can take it over from here.
Okay, fantastic. I am honored to be invited to present at your conference this week. So I've been asked to present about strategies for teaching low beginning English learners, and I'll take the next hour to do that. But I'll start by introducing myself just a little bit. My name is Jennifer Christensen. I've been a full-time adult education teacher for the last 20 plus years. Almost all of that time working primarily with low beginning English learners. Part of that time, I've also been a program coordinator of a medium-sized workplace English program that included classes for low literacy level all the way up through intermediate advanced students. I've also, for the last 10, 15 years, been designing resources and sharing those through my website, ABC English, and I'll show you quite a few of those resources during this presentation today. And then also currently I am a reading specialist. I provide one-on-one online tutoring to a handful of students, and I'll talk about that a little bit through the presentation as well. So I am gonna turn off my video for a little bit and then come back with the video on later in the presentation. I am located in Salt Lake City. Our city has 2 refugee resettlement agencies, and many of the students that I have worked with over the years are newly resettled refugee adult students who have come to Salt Lake through the International Rescue Committee or Catholic Community Services. There's also a fairly large immigrant population here. So there's a variety of students that I've worked with over the years here. All right, so the topic is strategies for teaching low beginning English learners. And my main points today are we're going to talk about different types of beginners. I'll share an assessment tool. We'll talk about literacy versus language. Next, I'll talk about the importance of teaching with routines. And I'll describe 4 different example scenarios and routines to fit those different scenarios. And then I'll end with some general communication tips, and I'll try to leave some time at the end for questions. We do have someone watching the chat. If you want to put a question in during the presentation, if that's a relevant question, that question can get addressed during the presentation as well. All right, so let's start by talking about different types of beginners. So you'll see in this chart that I have along this side a range of listening and speaking skills from low beginning to high beginning. Okay, so this is one important range to consider when you're thinking about a beginning level student. So what is their listening and speaking skill from a low to high range? And then the second range to consider is this decoding skills. Let's see, how do I hide this out of the way? Excuse me while I hide that control. Okay, so the other range to consider is if a student's decoding or literacy skills are low versus high. Okay, so this subset of beginner level students I've named Emergent Reader 1 students. These are students who are at the low beginning stage in both literacy skills and listening and speaking skills. And then here we have a different subset of beginners that has higher listening and speaking skills, but very early literacy skills. And then these 2 groups, these are students who are probably literate in their home language, but have low beginning speaking listening skills versus high beginning speaking listening skills. So I'll show you some examples. We'll watch this short video as a first
Okay,
example.
what is your name?
Amina,
And where are you from, Amina?
Somali.
How long have you lived in the United States?
3 years.
3 years.
Yeah.
Okay. And you work at the Humanitarian Center?
Yes.
What is your job?
Yeah, suit clothes.
Sorting clothes?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Do you go to English? Okay, you know, I just realized yesterday when even though this was filmed in Salt Lake City, she's got her Green Bay Packers lanyard on. I thought you guys would appreciate that. Just a coincidence there. So anyway, this student, she is at a low beginning speaking listening stage. She is giving one-word answers. She does understand these questions and can respond appropriately. But if you were to speak with her a little bit more, you'd realize she's at that low beginning speaking listening stage. She's been in class. Okay, what is your name? She's been in class for just a short amount of time. So this is the same student with her reading some literacy samples. What is the first one here?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Good.
Ham.
Okay.
Mom.
Okay.
Fish.
Okay.
I don't. Baby meal.
That's okay. That one's difficult. Okay.
Finish.
All right. Can you read a word like this?
No.
Okay, so you can see that she is not yet familiar with all of the alphabet letters and sounds. And by the way, you may have noticed that she said the word mom here. She said the word fish here. She said she said, I don't know, baby here. She's using those words because she's been learning the alphabet with this system of embedded mnemonics. So by the way, this alphabet packet right here, this is a free resource for anyone to use. I'll show you a little later in the presentation another place where you can access this. And I will also give you the link to this slideshow at the end of the presentation so you can get to it that way. So anyway, this alphabet packet teaches the letter names and the letter sounds using a keyword for each letter. So the keyword for the letter F, the sound is F, and the keyword is fish. So this student back here, she thought this was a letter F, and that's why she said fish. So she's just barely becoming familiar with some of the letters. She doesn't know all of them yet. So she's clearly at that low beginning literacy stage. So this student is an example of an Emergent Reader 1 student. Okay. All right, let's look at one more sample.
I am from Sudan. I live in United States 2 years, 3 months. And I work Humanitarian Center and sort clothes, sometimes quality check.
Okay, so this student, her speaking and listening ability is a little bit higher. I would put her in the high beginning range. She's using complete sentences. She's got a transition word in there sometimes. If you speak with her a little bit more, she's able to hold kind of a basic conversation pretty easily. Whoops. Okay, and then here's her literacy sample.
Can you read these right here? S, H,
Yeah,
M, T, D, R, C.
that's easy. What about here?
Wow.
That's right. Good.
The bird,
Uh-huh.
the game,
Uh-huh.
right,
Good.
cat.
Good. And what about here?
He is working he is.
Okay, so this student knows all of these alphabet letter names. That's quite easy for her, but she is not yet really accurate or automatic with using those sounds to put together a simple one-syllable word. So I noticed that this letter, sometimes she uses the D sound instead of G. She got confused if this was B or D. And then here, she knows some of these high-frequency words, but even though she knew this word was he right away, when she came across that very same word, she got stuck. So this student has learned some you know, the letter names, but she's still at a low literacy level. So I would say this student is a pretty good example of an emergent reader too. Okay, so let's take a short sidebar to talk about this assessment a little bit. This is also a free tool that you're welcome to use if you think it would be useful for you. It's called the 5-minute screening tool. It's at this website. This is at the ABC English website. So if you're at the ABC English website and you click here on library, you'll see these different categories. Down at the bottom is an assessment category. All of the assessment resources are free for anyone to use. This first one is a 5-minute screening tool. And you noticed in the video, I had it printed out and in a plastic sheet protector. I keep it handy for any time I meet a new student, so I can just quickly get an idea of what their literacy level is and their speaking listening level is. Yeah, so let's see, on this side, there's some reading samples. You saw an example of that. And then on the other side, there are some oral questions. You can use these questions to quickly gauge what the student's speaking listening ability is. I always think it's useful to ask students if they went to school in their home country and how many years. That's also a really good clue about if you would consider that student a literacy student or not. So if they're not, if they have less than 6 years of formal education in their home language, you really want to pay attention to their literacy needs. Okay. You know, while I'm here, when you're at the ABC English website and you click here on the library, I mentioned that assessment category. Also right here within the flashcards and charts category, this is where you find that alphabet packet, which is also a free resource for anyone to use. Okay, so we've talked about these two categories of beginners. A different type of beginner is this student. This student has formal education in his home country. He can read in his home language quite well. However, he's not yet able to have a basic conversation in English. So if I ask him a question like, how long have you lived here? Or tell me about the work you did in your country, I might not get any response or a one-word answer or a confused response that clues me into those listening and speaking skills are still at that low beginning level. And then finally, this woman, she also has formal education in her home language. She reads in Spanish well, but she is able to have that basic conversation. So her listening and speaking skills are more at that high beginning level. All right, so I want to point out that all of these students would be considered beginners. So if your program has like a standardized assessment, like maybe the TABE or CASAS test, maybe all of these students would end up as a level 1 or 2 through those standardized assessment tools, but they're students with very different needs. Okay, I'll point out that the key word for this range is language. We're considering their language ability. The key word for this range is literacy. So we're thinking about both language and literacy needs. So the topic of the presentation is strategies for teaching beginning English learners. And I wanted to start by talking about those different types of beginners, because this is actually quite a challenging topic to address because beginners are so diverse. One size does not fit all with beginners. You've got to really understand that not all beginners are the same. You've got to think about both literacy needs and language needs. And it's important to fit the type of instruction that you are offering with that type of beginner, okay, with their literacy needs and language needs. So I'm going to show you a diagram. I want you to notice the shift in focus for each type of beginner. Okay, so this is an ER1 student. This is a student that needs a chunk of the lesson time with attention to developing literacy, and also a chunk of lesson time devoted to developing language. Okay, and then in contrast, so that's a student like this first woman that we watched in the video. In contrast, an ER2 student would need more focus, more attention with literacy, because that is that student's weakest area, and possibly a little bit less attention given to language development. Okay, that's maybe like this student. Okay, and then ELL 1 and 2 students, they don't need a lot of attention given to literacy. They're already literate in their home language. So the main focus of the lesson is going to be developing language. All right, let's talk about that in a little more detail. So back to that ER1 student, Emergent Reader 1 student. This is a student who needs some attention in literacy and some attention in language. When you're teaching low beginning literacy, research suggests or supports using systematic phonics instruction. That is a gigantic topic I could spend a long time talking about, but in order to move on with our presentation, I'm just going to share with you this research article if you want to learn about systematic phonics instructions and the reasons why that's a research-backed method for teaching literacy skills. You can come to this resource. If you're working with a student who has low beginning literacy, it's also really useful to use an assessment tool to guide your instruction. So this is called the ABLE test. This again is at the ABC English website under the library and in this assessment category. We already talked about the screening tool. The other assessment tool here is called the ABLE test. ABLE stands for Assessment of Basic Literacy for Adult and Adolescent Emergent Readers. You can read about the guidelines and instructions here. And then you'll see there's 4 different levels of this assessment. There's a score sheet and a slideshow or booklet that you would show to the student to give the test. The level 1 assessment is going to help you understand what the student knows about basic consonant sounds, short vowel sounds, 1-syllable simple words, digraphs, that just means 2 letters together like CH, SH, TH, the vowel teams E and OO, and then high frequency words and simple sentences. So that's what this assessment helps you understand what the student does or does not yet know in those sorts of level 1 phonics skills. The level 2 skills brings in long vowel patterns, OU, OW, compound words, fluency in a controlled text. Level 3 moves into multi-syllable words, some common syllable endings. Level 4 gets into grammar endings, and more complicated words. So this is a really useful tool for understanding what a student doesn't yet know in terms of literacy skills, and helps you determine what their phonics level is, where to start within a systematic phonics system, and also to track their progress over time.
Excuse me, Jennifer.
Sure. Yeah, go ahead.
One of the participants is wondering if handouts will be available. I know that we will be sending an email at the end with all of the attachments, but could you take a moment and just explain how they would access ABC English?
Yeah, absolutely. So at the end of this presentation, I will share a link to all of these slides, and you can click on these links from the slides. But in general, to get to the ABC English website, you can type into your browser abceng.org. You can also write abcenglish.com, and it will get you here. The home page looks like this. The 3 main links are here. Most of what I'm sharing today is going to be here in the library. You'll see there are 10 different categories. There's some training resources, phonics lessons, vocabulary, readers, grammar, stories, home language, citizenship, assessment. We've talked about that a few times already. And then flashcards and charts. I mentioned that alphabet packet is here. Okay. And I will say that some of these resources are free. So everything in the assessment category is free. These samples are free, like that alphabet packet and the flashcards. Home language literacy resources are free. The training resources are free. All of these samples on this library page are free. But to get into these this larger collection of slideshows. There is a cost to that. You can see down here that there's a free 30-day trial. Anybody can test it out and see if it's a good fit for your teaching situation. And then if you'd like to continue using the resources, you can sign up for an individual license, or through an organization, sign up for a group license. Okay. All right. Thanks for that question. Are there any other questions at this point?
There's nothing else in the chat right now.
Okay. All right. All right. So we've talked about some pointers for teaching low beginning literacy. With this type of student, we want to have a chunk of our lesson time devoted to literacy instruction, and also a significant portion of our time in our lesson devoted to developing language skills. So when you're developing language skills, it's important to choose useful, relevant topics. So with an adult English learner, an example of a useful, relevant topic might be going to the doctor, health. Okay, so within that topic, you'll want to start with concrete language and avoid abstract. So what I mean by that is, within that topic of health or going to the doctor, the concrete language is going to be things like nouns and verbs like stomach, head, back, neck, doctor, appointment, going to the doctor. And what I mean by avoiding the abstract is some of those grammatical functional words, like maybe is or was, or, the abstract words, they're more, because they're abstract, it's challenging to address those effectively at the low beginning level. They are very, very important to address, but probably not the main focus at the low beginning level. That's something you'll start addressing more at a high beginning and intermediate level. So if you're getting stuck, you might want to think about making it more concrete and less abstract. It's important to use, it's useful to use pattern sentences and role play when developing low beginning language. So an example of a pattern sentence within the topic of health would be, what's the problem? My stomach hurts. What's the problem? My back hurts. What's the problem? My head hurts. So those pattern sentences where they're, repeating that pattern with different target language, target vocabulary. An example of a role play within that topic would be teaching students to make a simple phone call to call in sick to work. So you'd teach the students to say, hello, this is Amina. I'm not coming to work today. I am sick. Okay, so that very simple dialogue, they practice that situation. I do think it's really useful to use a good language curriculum. I've listed a few here at the ABC English website. I've got some vocabulary and grammar lesson slideshows. English Unlocked is a curriculum from Minnesota that you may know about. Ventures is a popular book for adult learners. Intercambio, there's quite a few more. These are just a few that came to mind. There's no reason to completely reinvent the wheel. I will say, if a student is at a very beginning literacy level, you may need to adapt some of these resources to focus especially on speaking and listening during your language portion of the lesson, and maybe skip over or adapt the reading, writing elements of some of these curriculum resources that maybe are not designed specifically for a low beginning literacy student. I will say the right fit is important. So if you're using a curriculum resource with this type of student and it's not working, it might be worth your time to change it up and try something until you find the right fit. I'll skip over that. With an Emergent Reader 2 student, this is the same points here. Systematic phonics instruction is still important. These are some resources. Useful, relevant topics are still important. However, here you're going to be able to move beyond the concrete and get into more of those language elements. This is the type of student that I have been most often working with in my online tutoring, and I've found that during the language portion of the lesson, Since it's a one-on-one situation, I found it useful to choose an individual goal that's relevant and important to the student. So for example, I have one student who really wants to work toward getting her driver's license. So we're talking about rules of the road and preparing language for getting ready for the driver test. I have another student who wants to pass the citizenship test this year, another student who's looking for a job, another student who has a 5-year-old daughter that she wants to be able to read with more. So these are some relevant, important individual goals that work well for, because it is a one-on-one situation, we can narrow in on those. These students are a little bit different because they are already literate in their home language, so literacy is much less of a focus. However, I still think it can be useful to teach basic phonics for pronunciation purposes. And within the ABC English website, I do have a set of, in the phonics category, there's a set of lessons called Fast Track. That is for this purpose. So for example, if you have a student who's already literate in their home language of Spanish, and that student applies the rules of reading Spanish to this word, they would say time or date or soap. Okay, so the rules of reading Spanish are different from the rules of reading English, and a student who's already literate in their home language would still need to be taught those basic phonics patterns of English so they can learn to have better pronunciation when they see written words. So that will be a fairly minor focus within your teaching, but still important. And then, excuse me. Your major focus with these students will be increasing their language ability through useful, relevant topics. It's a great idea to use a good curriculum. I added a few other resources here that may work for teaching online with students who are literate in their home language, Burlington English, or the formerly ESL library, now it's called ELLI. All right, so let's now look at some example scenarios and the importance of teaching with routines. All right, so as a first example, I'm going to open up this sample lesson outline that's available at this link. So once again, this is the ABC English website. Under the library category, this is the teacher training. There's a sample lesson outline right here. And I'm going to make this larger so you can see it a little better. So here on the second page of this packet, you'll see a sample lesson planning outline. 5 days, you can see the days of the week across the top here for 3 hours. So I've got 5 minutes of this, 10 minutes of this, 5 minutes of this. There are 11 different activities that fill up that 3 hours of time. And if you're interested in this, you can read details about each one of those 11 activities throughout this packet. This is a sample lesson outline for an emergent reader level 1 student. So this is a student who needs some attention to literacy skills and some attention to language skills. Excuse me. So you'll see that every day we start with a starter activity, an introductions routine, and then the first main part of the first half of class is literacy focus. So we've got a review, a phonics lesson, some writing practice, and some review where students are reading together in pairs. We've got a break. After the break, I have a routine where we're working on personal information. So for this specific type of student, this emergent reader level 1 student, it can be really useful to every day spend a little time toward mastering personal information. And what I mean by that is the ability to write their name, say their address, write their address, say their telephone number, write their telephone number, say their birth date, talk about their kids' ages. That kind of personal information is really, really important, but does take a little bit of time over a long period of time for students to get that down. And then this yellow section is the language development part of the lesson. We're working with useful, relevant topics. There's a routine to record some words in a notebook, and then a closing routine. So that's what I mean by teaching with routines. Routines are really great for students, and especially for low beginning English students, because routines make class predictable. So students understand what to expect and have a framework for organizing new knowledge. And it helps students feel safe and comfortable in the classroom. A student who is an emergent reader has never had formal education before. They may feel quite intimidated by coming to school, and if you don't understand the language, that's even more uncomfortable. So if they can start to understand, this is what's going to happen at the beginning of class. When we finish this, we're going to do something that looks like this. When we finish that, we're going to pull out our whiteboards and do some phonics work. That helps students to pretty quickly become more comfortable in the classroom. Routines are great because they naturally introduce spaced repetition. So you're getting lots of repetition and review over time with variation. Spaced repetition is, research shows that instead of doing a lot of one thing in a block of time, it's better to do a little bit every day over an extended period of time. That's called spaced repetition. That's better for learning. Routines are also good for teachers. It helps you to be more efficient in your planning. You're just going to plug pieces into an existing structure. It helps you as a teacher to think about long-term planning. So you're thinking about your lesson progression over several weeks or months. And then once again, it naturally introduces that spaced repetition. So this routine that I showed you within this packet is specifically for Emergent Reader 1 students in a traditional classroom 5 days a week for 3 hours. So that's this sort of student. This is a routine that works really great for this situation, but it would not be appropriate for every beginner class situation. Okay. Here's a different situation. So this is a sample lesson outline for in-home tutoring with no technology. So even in this much less formal teaching situation, I still think it's useful for you as a teacher to think about a simple routine. So I've suggested that you still have 3 routine elements of your lesson. So this suggests that for the first 15 or so minutes, you're going to have a literacy focus. The next chunk of time is a personal information focus. And then the last segment of the lesson is a language development focus. And then when you come back to visit them next time for your next one-on-one lesson in their house, you'll review what you did last time and add a little bit more within literacy. Review what you did last time and add a little bit more within personal information. And then review the language from last time and add a little bit more. Okay, so this is a different situation. We're talking about a less formal one-on-one in-person tutoring situation, 1 or 2 times a week for an hour. Even in that situation, I think teaching with routines can still really help you as a low beginning English teacher. Here is another scenario. I mentioned that I am doing some online tutoring with Emergent Reader 2 students. So these are students who can speak quite well, but have low literacy skills. So because literacy is their greatest area of need, we're spending kind of the bulk of our lesson doing some systematic phonics instruction. And then for the second part of our time, we're working toward a personal goal. So here's a quick video. This is a lesson from just a couple days ago with one of my current students. Hopefully this will load quickly.
Yes.
Okay, and I have your lesson ready?
Yeah.
All right, are you ready?
I'm so ready.
So ready.
Yes.
I love it. Okay,
Uh-huh.
so let's listen to this example.
Face.
This word is face. Okay, I think you understand face, like I want to wash my face. Okay, face. All right, so this word face, it has three sounds. The first sound uses letter. The vowel sound is A. That one's quiet. That one's A.
Say.
This is interesting because this letter has the S sound. Okay.
Okay.
When C is before E, the sound is S.
Okay.
This says when C is before E, the sound is S.
One C is before E, the sound is C.
Yeah, exactly. So the sound right here is S. So the word is face.
Okay.
Okay, here's the sound. S. All right, write that in your notebook. The word is face.
Okay.
Okay,
Face.
so I'll stop here. So for the first 25 minutes or so of this lesson, we're analyzing a few words. She's learning about the C before E rule. We're looking at several words that have that pattern, the soft C pattern. We're going to read a bunch of words like that and some words within sentences. And then after that lesson, later, we're going to move to, looks like, okay, so later in the lesson, she is working toward her citizenship test. Anyway, this last part of the lesson, she is working on learning the information needed for the citizenship test and learning to read and write the words that are required for the US citizenship test. So it's a very simple routine in this maybe less formal one-on-one situation, but it still really helps us to organize our learning. Okay, finally, this last routine scenario I want to show you is pretty different from the others. Last year in November and December, I was helping out at one of the local elementary schools at their Family Engagement Center. This is a brand new building that just was, I think this is only the second year it's been occupied. It's a brand new, beautiful building. When they built this, they also built this satellite building called the Family Engagement Center. And the school offers a variety of different services and activities here to help get the families in the area involved in the school community. This school is in a neighborhood with a lot of apartment complexes and neighborhoods where new immigrants and refugee families live. It's within walking distance. It's a really great location. And one of the services that they offer at this Family Engagement Center is a parent English class. And when they offered this class at the beginning of the school year, it was so popular that 60 students were showing up that first week, and they had to split them into two groups. So one group comes on Monday, Wednesday, and another group comes on Tuesday, Thursday. And even with that, you've got 15 to 20 students in the beginner classroom and 15 to 20 students, sometimes more, I would say even 25 students in each the beginner and the intermediate classroom. One thing that's really challenging about this situation is it's mixed level beginners. So we have both students who are not literate in their native language and students who are literate in their native language, all mixed together in a classroom full of different types of beginners. Also, this program is mostly run by volunteers. There is a part-time paid position, but that teacher doesn't have any training or experience with teaching ESL. So it's all of these types of students mixed together. So one of the planning challenges in this situation is it's hard to know how many students and how many volunteers are going to show up each day. It's more of like a drop-in situation. All of those beginners are mixed together. Some are literate in their home language and some are not. The students trickle in and leave early. They don't all come on time or stay the whole time. There is a paid part-time position called a family connector, and that person is in charge of teaching that class. However, that person doesn't have any training in teaching or teaching English language, and there aren't a lot of resources. And it's a large shared classroom space. So in the afternoon, that classroom space is used for the after-school program. That program kind of has the authority over that room space, and the setup isn't ideal, but we don't really have the ability to change it. So the classroom looks like this. There's a door here and a projector and a smart board here with a teacher desk and another table with a bunch of stuff and another table and some filing cabinets. And one thing that's challenging about this room setup is there's so much distance between the board and where the students are teaching. If I had control over this room, I would definitely move all of these things to the back and move the students right up close to the board here, so there's better proximity. But we don't have the ability to do that. Another thing that's challenging is we've got these two large tables pushed together. And so the volunteer is sitting with this group of students. But if this student needs a little bit of help, this table is so large that the volunteer can't just like lean over and point at the worksheet or, quickly help. So that's another little bit of a challenge in the room setup. So the before situation was that the teacher would stand here at the board displaying a lesson on the projector and do most of the talking and teaching up here, while the volunteer is kind of sitting quietly and occasionally helping students here. So this is a routine that we developed to help address some of those challenges. From 9 to 10 o'clock for the first hour, we've got a routine where we're doing some small group rotations of 20 minutes each, with the volunteers kind of leading each station. And I'll show you just a little bit about each of these stations in a minute. So for 20 minutes, the one group of students is here, and then they move to here, and then they move to here. And the teacher at the same time is pulling out a few students to do some focused literacy work for those students who do need some literacy help. So it's a busy time during that first hour. Because of these rotations and the small group activities, it's a little bit easier to accommodate students who come in late. It's not, the students who come in late can still get involved and they haven't kind of missed like the introduction to a larger lesson. And it allows the teacher to get a little bit of time pulling out students who need some literacy focus, because the whole group doesn't need that, only a few students need that. And then for the second hour, we do a group activity. By 10 o'clock, pretty much everybody is here. We can come together and do a group activity. I've been using the reading skills stories as a basis for this group activity, and I'll show that to you in a minute. So this routine has helped to solve some of those challenges. So we're using the volunteers more effectively. Before, the volunteers were doing a lot of sitting and listening. In this routine, the volunteers are being much more interactive with the students, and we're using them more effectively. It accommodates late students more easily. We don't need to use the screen at the front of the room for the full 2 hours. We moved the tables into an L shape. So what I mean is we took these tables and moved them into an L shape so the volunteer can sit here in the corner and have better proximity to the student. So if the volunteer is holding up something for the students to see, the students are closer and can see that more easily. The volunteer can reach across and point to the student's notebook. That's really helped to make that small change. So there are several small group activities. We found that it was easier for the volunteers to rotate rather than the students. So after 20 minutes, this volunteer is going to stand up, pick up the bin of materials and move over to this group, and each of the volunteers moves. And then the teacher, like I mentioned, is over here pulling out some students for some phonics work. Okay, so each of these small group stations has kind of a focus. One small group station is a numbers focus. So we've got some play money, some teaching clocks, a calendar, a number chart, a variety of things are in this bin. And we're not trying to use all of those things every day. We're just saying we're just going to do one of these activities each day. So we'll say today we're going to practice days of the week, and here's the calendar. And for the next 20 minutes, I want you to use this calendar and do lots of repeat after me and practice those days of the week, and maybe have the students write those in their notebook. Okay. In another small group activity, we've got some books that have some basic vocabulary and pattern sentences. And in another station, we've got this set of basic English textbooks where the student and volunteer can open up to one of the pages in the book and have a discussion about that language topic and take some notes in their notebook. And I'm rushing through this. If you're interested in this routine, I did add some links here where you can read some more details about it. So that first hour, we're rotating among these small group stations. And then the second hour, our group activity is based on these reading skills stories. This is one of the categories in the library at the ABC English website. So each of these stories is based around a useful, relevant topic for language development. So for example, if this is our story of the day, I would put this, by the way, for this group activity, I have all the students come up here and stand in a semicircle in front of the board. We've got all the students and volunteers. We take a minute to review everybody's name and welcome the group, do a little community building. How is everybody feeling today? And then when everybody's here close to the board, I'll display this group activity. We start with a photo discussion. So I'll ask everybody to look at this photo and tell me what you can say in English about this photo. I'll see what the group can already say. And then we'll listen to the story. It's a 47-second story. We'll listen to the whole thing. After they listen to it, I'll ask them to tell me what they understood. We'll listen to it a second time. I'll ask them if they understood a little bit more. Okay, we'll do a little vocabulary preview. And then this is an opportunity to listen to each line of the story one by one and repeat. So this is 3 seconds, one line of the story. We'll listen to it, and then the whole group will repeat it back. We'll listen to the next line, they'll repeat it back. So all of this is speaking and listening. We haven't introduced any text here yet. So after we've listened to the story and repeat lines one by one, at that point, I give the students a copy of this packet. We print out the packet for every student, and the student goes back to their table with their volunteer teacher, and they have the rest of the hour to read this out loud together, talk about these comprehension questions, do a little grammar activity, word sort based on phonics patterns, some multi-syllable word work, some vocabulary work. This is an opportunity to read the story again with a focus on fluency. And then at the end, for students who are kind of fast movers, they can get to this before the end of the hour where they'll have an opportunity for a conversation and some writing practice. Okay, so this routine where we have some small group rotations for an hour and then a group activity with a topic has worked well for this particular situation, where we've got mixed beginners and some volunteers. And just a reminder that it works well for this situation, but it's been designed specifically for this situation. It may not work for every situation. All right, so teaching with routines is useful in any context. It has many benefits for both students and teachers. It can be useful when you have like a group of students who are all kind of the same type of student. It's useful in less formal home teaching. It's useful in online teaching. It's useful in a mixed group with volunteers. I encourage you to think about how you could teach with routines in your specific context. All right, we have just a few minutes left. I've talked about 4 types of beginners, the importance of routines. I've got a couple things to say about communication tips, and then I'll take some questions. So just a reminder that good teaching is interactive, and I think it can be really useful to think about your rate of student response. So students should be saying something, doing something, or writing something at least once a minute. Okay, so think about in your lessons, are the students opening their mouths or doing something or writing something at least once a minute? And you might be wondering, well, if they're low beginning English learners who don't understand the language, how in the world do you get them to say something or do something or write something? And I want to remind you that even low beginning English students can do things like repeat after me. So if you're introducing some vocabulary words, you would say the word and then motion to the whole class to repeat it after you. And then you'd say the next word and motion to the whole class to repeat it after you. You can also have low beginning English students making an action. TPR is a language teaching technique. It stands for total physical response. This is just where you pair an action with a word. Okay, and I'll show you an example of that. And then you can also have students write a word on a mini whiteboard or in a notebook. Anita Archer is a teaching guru who's well known in like elementary school teaching circles, but she talks about teaching with a perky pace. And I think that's also really useful to think about within our context of teaching adult learners. You want to keep your lesson moving along, have everything prepared so you can transition from one activity to the next without lost time. So keep in mind that teaching with a perky pace. And I'm going to show you this last lesson example to kind of describe how all of that can look. This is a lesson slideshow to teach about using the verb to want. So we'll start with a pronoun review. In past lessons, the students have already learned about these, so this is just review. So I can kind of drill the students, what pronoun do you use when you talk about a man? And they would look at this clue and say he for a woman, she for two or more people, they, yourself, I, okay, and so forth. And then we're going to introduce this word want. So I've got 4 photos where you can practice a pattern simple dialogue. So let me turn on my video here. Let's see. Now I've hid the controls. So how do I get back to that? I should know how to do this by now. Okay, well, I don't want to lose time on that. So the hand motion that's suggested for the word want is to place your hand on your chest. So imagine that I'm showing that to students. I'm going to place my hand on my chest each time I say the word want. So for this first photo, I'm going to teach the students a simple dialogue where I'll say, what do you want? Everybody repeat, what do you want? Okay, and then I'll place my hand on my chest when I say the word want. I want pasta. Okay, so the whole class is going to repeat that simple dialogue. Okay, then we'll go on to another variation. What do you want? I want rice. What do you want? I want salad. What do you want? I want chicken. Okay, and then we'll give the students an opportunity to form their own sentences. Here's the pronoun I. Here's the vocabulary word chicken. How can you make a sentence with want? So I want chicken. Okay, and then lots of opportunities to respond here. Now we'll change to a new pronoun and do a similar set of words. Later in the lesson, we add in don't want, a hand motion for, let's see. Okay, here's don't want. A hand motion for don't want might be like waving something away. All right. So that's an example of how you can get students to be responding really, really regularly during your teaching. You can have them repeat after you, make actions. Later in this slideshow lesson, there's an opportunity to write some simple sentences, and you want to keep that pace moving along. All right, so these next communication tips, I'm actually going to skip, but they are there for you to read if you would like to come back to this slideshow. Okay, so I have about 5 or 6 minutes for some questions. And while you're thinking of your questions, I'll also share this link to the presentation in the chat, and I'll try to get my video back on. Let's see. Can anyone remind me? That it seems like there's a shortcut to bring back those controls so I can get to the chat.
Anna, are you on? Or Robin, can you help her out?
I just asked you to share your video. Did a prompt come up for that?
Start my video. There we go. Great, thank you. There we go. Okay, I'm back on. And then I'm sorry, I can't see where the chat is to add that link in the chat, but I can make sure that I get that to you later on. So what happened is I hid my meeting controls so they weren't in the way, and I don't know how to get them back. Anyway, I'd love to take
Okay.
questions if anybody has any questions.
And we will send a follow-up email, Jennifer. We can, we'll have the link to the presentation in that email.
Perfect. Yeah, great.
Yeah, Jennifer, you can send them to me, Robin, and I can include them in our follow-up email.
Yeah, I'll make sure you get that. Okay,
And
well,
I'm not seeing any questions in the chat.
yeah, that's just fine. Hopefully I've been able to share something that is getting your mind thinking about something you could try out in your teaching situation. I do have my email address right here. You're welcome. Anyone's welcome to send me an email. I enjoy communicating with teachers and swapping ideas, so I'm happy to take questions by email as well.
And Jennifer, just one question. Mary is asking if this is just for group instruction, or could you use this in one-on-one?
Oh, absolutely. You can use it in one-on-one. So I do some one-on-one online tutoring and use the resources at ABC English. And I mentioned earlier in the presentation 4 different routine scenarios. 2 of those 4 situations were for one-on-one teaching. So you can go back through the slideshow and see some suggestions for that specific to one-on-one teaching.
Great. And then Jamie is asking, do you think it's important that the literacy and language parts of the lesson be connected or about the same topic?
Yeah, that is a great question. So you'll remember earlier in the presentation, let me see if I can get to it quickly. I shared a link to a research paper. That would be what I would recommend for you to look at. Sorry, okay, here it is. This is on slide number 26. There's a link to a research article. My short answer is no, I don't think you need to connect those. So because it's so important to teach, it's most efficient to teach literacy skills in a systematic phonics way. That means you've got to start with the simplest types of words first. So start with the alphabet sounds, then move to 1-syllable, 3-letter consonant, vowel, consonant words like bat, bad, or gum, or sun, or run. But those words are not conducive to natural language. So you're going to be practicing really basic sentences and stories that are not natural, authentic language. It's best practice for literacy development, but that is not best practice for language development. So on the language side of things, you do want to be speaking and listening with lots of authentic language. You don't want to limit your language development to the types of words that students are able to read within their decoding progression. And so that's why at this low literacy level, you're separating those more. And then as they develop those basic phonics skills, they'll come together more.
And then another question, any suggestions for a multi-level class? If you have
Yeah.
students at different levels.
Yeah, so that 4th routine that I talked about where we had the volunteers and some small group stations, that kind of routine works pretty well for a mixed group. It does require having volunteers in the classroom to make those small stations work. That is really challenging to meet the needs of all these different types of students in one classroom. So if you don't have volunteers, you could maybe think about setting up a routine where part of the time is really directed toward meeting the needs of this type of student, and maybe the other students are either, involved in the whole group, but it's not their target need. Or if you have Some programs have like what's the word I'm looking for? Like a technology element where maybe they could be doing the computer stations for 30 minutes while the teacher focuses on this and then they switch. That is challenging. I know it happens often, but it's not easy to do. If there are ways to split those students up into groups where you can meet their needs better, that's something to look at a systems level to see if you can better meet those by splitting them up.
Great. And then we just have some comments about thank you. It was a lot of information, very helpful. And I would just say thank you also.
Yeah, you're very welcome. Yeah, thanks for inviting me to present. I hope that your conference has gone well this week.
Thank you so much, Jennifer, for being with us here today. This was a really fabulous session. I really enjoyed hearing about this, and I'm sure our audience did as well. So thank you to all of you who joined us today and for the entire series. And I would like to let our Associate Director, Ashley Henrik, say a few parting words.
Sure. Thank you, Robin, and thank you as well, Jennifer, again, for helping us wrap up the conference. As Robin mentioned, I just wanted, on behalf of Wisconsin Literacy, to thank everyone who was part of our audience this week and our presenters as well. We do encourage you to please fill out the surveys that you receive after each of the sessions. That feedback really helps us to plan future professional development opportunities that meet your needs. So please do take a few minutes to fill those out and submit those. And then we also welcome you to join us on March 5th when we have our largest online day of giving, the Big Share. So more information has been shared and will be coming out, but we would love to have you join us for that when we have some different activities going on online that day. So thank you again, everyone, and we look forward to seeing you at another Wisconsin Literacy Professional Development opportunity very soon.